There is an industry in America which has existed for over 400 years. Trapping of animals and the fur trade have changed little with the times. Millions of animals are trapped and skinned every year for the vanity of fashion. Once, trapping conjured up romantic images of mountain men taming the West. Now, the trade is coming under increasing scrutiny. The focus is shifting from the trapper to the trapped.
Bunch of beavers. Beavers, and muskrats, gray fox, red fox, coon.
Each year in America, a staggering number of animals are trapped and killed. At least 4 million animals are trapped and killed for their fur. Hundreds of thousands of animals are trapped and killed because they are predators. Unknown millions are trapped and killed in the unregulated field of nuisance animal control. And millions more are injured or killed as non-targets, victims of traps set for other species. Trapping is allowed to occur on private property and public lands, from national forests to wilderness areas, even national wildlife refuges. There are 3 basic types of traps: the snare, Conibear, and the most widely used, the steel-jawed leg hold.
This is a very, very safe trap, even for domestic animals. But there it is in its set position. The jaws are open. And as the animal steps on the pad, I'm going to put my finger up from the bottom. It goes off and catches him and detains him in the trap. I don't really think that you would really have a problem with this.
Well, what about the snapping aspect of it, though? Wouldn't that break the animal's leg?
No.
It doesn't?
No.
So the animal steps on the trap, and you can see what happened there. That's tremendous force on the leg. That tremendous force, first of all, is extremely damaging. It can be extremely damaging to the leg. It can actually sever the skin, sever tendons. It can actually cause broken bones. Immediately, the trapped jaw is snapping shut on the limb. The animal who's trapped, being a wild animal and restraint being the worst thing you could ever do to a wild animal, immediately jumps. They run and lunge with this trap attached to their leg. In so doing, they cause further damage to the leg, and they frequently, that's one of the big things that are found, is dislocation of the joints. The animal lunges and tries to get away, can't get away. So what's the next thing to do? Try to bite at the trap. Well, you can imagine what happens when teeth bite against hard metal. Teeth break, and that's another source of pain for them. They can't get away. So then the next thing to do is to bite at their leg. They may chew sufficiently on their leg to actually sever the leg from the trap.
The trapper will come to the set and find that there's a leg there, that the animal's chewed it off, broken it off, twisted it off. In some cases, the animals are still alive in the trap, and another predator comes along and kills it.
Yeah, dogs killed him. You can see the dog tracks right there. Yeah, it's burnt. Yeah, it's burnt. It ain't no pelt there, you know. Dogs has earned it. Say, he's wrapped up. Them dogs has pulled him out. Might make a rug out of it. It ain't that pitiful.
The snare, a primitive wire noose.
An animal gets caught around a limb or around the neck, depending on how it's set and what kind of bait is used to entice the animal to get in there. And then when they pull, you can see that gets the snare tighter and tighter and tighter. If it's around the neck, it takes quite a bit of time before it actually kills the animal. If it's around the leg, of course, it just holds the animal until the trapper comes and kills her or him.
I've had a little bit of experience with some cable snares that I ran into in Alaska. Apparently someone had put them out to trap wolves just outside of Denali National Park, and they had set up a double trap or a double snare set. And the wolf, when it was caught, struggled so much and then got caught in the extra traps that it really tore the animal apart. He tore himself apart struggling with these. Snares are diabolical inventions.
Promoted as a humane alternative, the Conibear, conceived with the intention of crushing the animal's spine.
This trap is designed to kill the animal instantaneously, and it does.
In order for them to be instant kill traps, the jaws have to snap down somewhere along the upper part of the spinal cord in order to cause an instantaneous death. Rarely do the animals get into that kind of a position. Most of the time when I've seen animals trapped like this, their body is crushed, their spinal cord is partially crushed, but it's too low down to cause them to die.
Traps are frequently set in water to cause death by drowning. The National Trappers Association euphemistically describes drowning as carbon dioxide narcosis and promotes this as a humane method of killing aquatic mammals.
He bit his tongue against that trap.
Probably when that trap hit him.
Yeah.
With aquatic animals like beavers, they're able to hold their breath, if you will, for a much longer time than a land animal would. So therefore, they feel the effects of being restrained underwater for a much longer time. It can be up to 12 minutes.
Now he looks a little fatter. Yeah, he hadn't been caught so long.
Animals targeted for their fur, not killed by trap injuries, predation, or exposure, are most often clubbed to death, suffocated, or strangled to preserve the pelt. An increasing number of citizens have recognized trapping for what it is. In response to this growing enlightenment, a social movement continues to gather momentum.
Shame! Shame! Shame on those!
Surveys show an overwhelming majority of Americans oppose trapping animals for their fur. This has resulted in an unstable fur market, and most trappers must rely on other means to support themselves. Commercial trapping is now little more than a hobby.
Hey, I sold red fox for over $100 before, back in the 70s. But, they're cheap now. I'm gonna catch me some urine from them because that's good use for trapping bobcats.
Without a living to be earned, many commercial fur trappers have turned to killing so-called nuisance animals. This private industry continues to grow unchecked as wildlife areas are taken over by agricultural and suburban expansion and human-wildlife conflicts increase.
Many of these trappers in many states do not have to be licensed, and yet they're using these same body-crushing devices in urban and suburban settings. We found Soccer, our pet cat of 12 years, in this inhumane steel trap, killed instantly or not, we have no idea.
The trapper responsible, who had previously killed 3 cats and injured a dog, is free to kill again. Increasing public opposition has encouraged progressive legislators to fight for meaningful industry regulation.
Bringing these indiscriminate traps into suburban areas is an incredible mistake. I mean, we're not going to see not only the continued degradation of the wildlife and pets, but we're probably going to see kids, adults who are killed or seriously injured by these devices.
Have you incidentally trapped any dogs?
Oh, yeah. Hey, anybody that's trapped as long as I have and say they never trapped a dog, either he ain't never set many traps or he's a pretty good liar.
Studies show for every 1 animal intended to be caught with a trap, up to 10 non-target animals may be unintentionally killed.
One of the big problems with the traps, of course, despite claims to the contrary, is that they, by their very nature, are non-selective in what they catch. And I think this is evidenced by the fact that we see eagles and owls and hawks of various types that are caught in traps. And of course, we only see the birds that people bring to us. We believe that that's probably the tip of the iceberg. I have no idea how many more birds are out there that are killed directly or are left to die, or worse yet, really in most cases, are released again with the thought that they will be okay. But we know from our experiences in dealing with these birds medically that most trap injuries are very severe. They always result in the loss of any portion of the limb that's below the trap injury site itself.
Dick Randall, former federal government trapper, in testimony before Congress.
The leg hold trap is inherently non-selective. It is probably the most cruel device ever invented by man and is a direct cause of inexcusable destruction and waste of our wildlife. My trapping records show that for each target animal I trapped, about 2 unwanted individuals were caught. Because of trap injuries, these non-target species usually had to be destroyed.
Predators are animals that depend on their prey for survival. Despite growing scientific evidence of their ecological importance, taxpayer-funded agencies wage a costly and misguided war against them under the guise of protecting livestock and the animals humans hunt for game.
We have been trapping, poisoning, killing coyotes for the last century, and yet the number of coyotes has proliferated during this period. And this is partially a response to our trapping efforts to exterminate their populations.
If the habitat is there and the resources are there, the species is going to try to fill that niche. So if you remove a few animals, whether it's trapping or whatever, the natural tendency of that species is to just reproduce more. So it's really a never-ending game.
We spend about $10 to $15 million a year, depending on whose estimates you use, in so-called predator control. They kill indiscriminately animals that don't even kill sheep. And the bottom line is, it would cost less money if we paid each rancher for his lost sheep.
Animal Damage Control or Wildlife Services is using taxpayers' dollars to commit indiscriminate mayhem. And ultimately, I mean, these people aren't even accomplishing their own goal. It's absurd. I mean, it's something that the American people, if they knew about it and if they could vote on it, a very overwhelming percentage would vote no.
Even the industry itself had to change its name from Animal Damage Control to Wildlife Services to somehow convince the public that this agency is benefiting wildlife.
I'm a little mad. That's the way I like to start today.
Wildlife management agencies promote the concept that trapping benefits wildlife. Their argument focuses on prevention of disease and population control. According to the National Academy of Sciences, costly trapping and poisoning campaigns aimed at controlling the incidence of rabies are ineffective and should be abolished.
The studies that have been done have demonstrated unequivocally that trapping for disease control doesn't work.
Wildlife management is a myth. Species like an otter does not require management. They will come into their own sense of balance. And the number of predators which will be able to prey upon them will be extremely limited, and was always limited. Otters came into their own territorial use of areas, and they filled niches that needed to be filled. So there's no management needed, in my opinion.
Now, you don't have to have an overpopulation to have a need to control population. We want to avoid overpopulation.
Skin him out. Throw him in the freezer and he'll be up to the fur auction. All you do is skin him.
And then what do you do with the remaining part of the animal? Is there any use that's made of it?
Oh, otters?
Yes, sir.
Oh, he go to landfill. Yeah. female. Male and a female.
We don't know how to manage populations at all. But over and above that, trapping, because it is aimed at removing certain individuals of certain species in order to get money, and it's not done for population control, it can have no beneficial effect on populations. In fact, it will skew populations, because if you're trapping, for example, for lynx, because lynx bellies are high in the market this year, the prey that the lynx would get, the rodents, etc., will increase in numbers when you trap the lynx. So it makes no sense to say that trapping somehow controls populations in isolation from everything else that's happening.
Trapping has brought many species to the brink of extinction, including wolves, beaver, sea otter, and lynx. The U.S. Forest Service, as recently as 1999, conceded lynx are extremely susceptible to trapping. And where permitted, trapping is a significant source of mortality. In spite of these and other official findings, wildlife management agencies continue to promote population and disease control theories to support the few who demand trapping continue.
How many beaver did you get last year?
Oh, 400, 500.
And what about the year before that?
500, 6, you know, I don't know, 400, 500. And there's some years I've got as high as 1,000. I've been going since way before daylight. I don't know what I got. I always say this truckload. I caught 61 beavers one night several years ago. In one night, that's most I ever counted. I ain't saying that's the most I ever caught. But you won't do that. You won't do that long, you know, because you catch them out. But the place I was at it was beaver paradise.
The trappers, especially the very good trappers, are very conscientious about their harvest.
A lot of people set too many traps. Most people set too many traps.
How do you know that?
I've seen it happen. I've seen people, before I set one trap, they might set 2 dozen.
If you run a trap line very long, you run into a conservation agent checking your traps for you. I can see that. They get out there in the field, they're looking to make sure the traps are tagged, making sure that the traps are run every day.
You know, we've got so many other duties and responsibilities, and we're so spread out, and there's not enough of us to actually concentrate on every duty that we need to concentrate on. It's pretty well self-regulating, yes.
One of my first bills that I ever introduced was to have an all-out ban of steel jaw traps. It was interesting that the issue was brought to me by school children who wanted to do it. And I got more mail and more support than you can imagine. It was also a very good lesson in politics, because I found out that despite all this overwhelming disapproval of the use of steel jaw traps, there were a lot of commercial interests out there who were very powerful in the political arena.
The trapping industry has enlisted the United States Fish and Wildlife Service to publicly fund a 3-year study to improve public perception of trapping.
We've lost our credibility, so we're trying to maintain credibility.
Every year, Congress has allocated close to $500,000 to further test leg hold traps and other restraining devices. This is simply a PR ploy.
Let's get real. If you want to improve the lives of animals caught in traps, let's do trap research. And that's what we're in the middle of doing right now nationwide, testing our traps, pick those that are the most humane, and make those the ones that are used. There are a lot of modifications to leg hold traps that you say, yeah, it's still a leg hold trap. It's the most humane thing. If it's a padded trap, whether it's got rubber jaws, or if it's got lamination, a piece of lamination.
Padded traps are actually an offense to one's intelligence. There's this narrow piece of rubber on either jaw, but you still have the same degree of force that's necessary to hold the leg.
Or an offset jaw, you can catch an animal in it, and you can take that animal out of the trap, and you couldn't tell which foot it was caught in.
An offset trap has a piece of metal or a little burr of metal that prevents the jaws closing completely. There might be an 1/8 of an inch to 3/8 of an inch gap between the one side of the jaw and the other. This is absolutely nonsensical because when you think about it, the jaws have met the animal's leg long before this offset could have any effect. It's simple physics. It just defies logic why people would think that an offset trap would be humane.
Millions of animals are tested each year to see if these devices cause injuries, even though we know from the millions of animals that have been tested over the last 30 years that these traps cause tremendous injuries.
It's absurd. I mean, these traps cannot be made humane. They have no brain. You know, they maim and they kill in very, very vicious ways.
Charles Darwin, as early as 1863, was alerting people to the brutality of trapping.
We shall be told that setting steel traps is the only way to preserve game, but we cannot believe that Englishmen, when their attention is once drawn to the case, will let even this motive weigh against so fearful an amount of cruelty.
88 countries, including the 15 member nations of the European Union, have banned leg-hold traps. Voters of several American states have had to resort to the public ballot initiative process to stop the use of these cruel and indiscriminate devices.
We have to get people involved to go to their elected legislators and say, look, we won't tolerate this anymore.
Until a member of Congress hears from 100 or 200 or 500 angry voters who are saying, I don't care what you heard from that special interest group, I don't care how much money they gave to your campaign, I personally am going to vote against you unless you work to change this barbaric practice and end this, well, then people are going to listen.
Official wildlife management policy continues to compare killing wildlife to the sustainable harvest of trees. As we begin the 21st century, the ethical issue lingers. What will it take to recognize animals as sentient members of our communities, deserving of respect and protection?
The fundamental problem is that we are treating other animals as commodities.
To think that killing something is entertaining, I think, is a pretty bad indication of the human psyche. The whole system is just, it's intolerable. It just doesn't fit in a civilized society.
Sustainable use is what we're all about. And so let's show people that, hey, there are wildlife benefits to using wildlife. You know, it's hard to argue how you want to die. You know, death is death.
Do you think that that's a humane way for that animal to die?
Well, that's a good question. It would be a whole lot more peaceful than, you know, being, you know, run over by vehicles or starving to death, or it has to be better than some of the diseases that come along out there. Mm-hmm.
As a veterinarian, I look at the trap as just as a medical person, as an abominable device that just cannot be allowed to be used just because it is unconscionably cruel.
How can it not be inhumane when it's causing severe tissue damage, it's causing loss of limbs, it's causing animals to be exposed to sub-zero temperatures, dehydration, all kinds of pain and things that go along with that, and not regarded as inhumane?
You know, I don't do it for the money that's in it, or I don't do it to see how many I can kill, how many I can trap, how many I can skin. Boy, look how many I got. I don't do it for that. I do it because I love it, and that's the way, you know, that's the way trappers are.
An 80% majority of Americans favor simply viewing wildlife without killing.
I hope that our children can all learn the values of wildlife in a non-consumptive, in a harmonious manner. We need to begin to establish a new tradition, a new generation of people that understand the beauty that surrounds them and the wonders of the wildlife that's here.
What we uncovered was a trade in dogs and cats. Byproducts, their fur and their skin, probably accounts for the slaughter of in excess of 2 million animals a year, and ending up in consumer products virtually every place in the world.
People around the world are unaware that the seal hunt even goes on. Most people think that the hunt ended in the 80s. But when wearing fur trim is popular, it makes all fur prices go up, including seal, which is why more baby seals are being killed now than were back in the 70s and 80s.
It took some time before I did put two and two together. That what furs represents is horrible deaths of an animal that I claim that I love.
Hey, just grab this little rod right here. Put that in your butt. Grab the tail, so you got both hands.
Yeah.
You right?
There was a golden retriever that I had treated a number of years ago that had been caught in a steel lake hold trap. And unfortunately, because of the amount of damage to the area, lack of blood supply, broken bones, the only way we could save that dog's life was to amputate the leg.